Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon dear students. So as in the previous lecture we completed half chapter already, the explanation part, right? Now in this we will be doing the remaining chapter which we haven't completed yet. So in the previous chapter how much we've completed, basically we have completed till where where he was almost about to give up on in the on the search of rice, that was the kasbai rice basically. Then somewhere or somehow he got the hope, and then he decided to let's just give it another try, or the last try. So then what happened? I decided to give it one last try and spoke to Baban's father and some other elders. After many meaningful conversations, they mentioned the name of Kasbai. So basically, what happened when he was almost about to give up? So basically, what he thought, let's just try again, and basically, the last try he thought. So he talked to Baban's father, and after talking to some other elders also, finally he got to know like about the name of Kasbai. That's what the people mentioned, the elder people, or like even the Baban's father, or like he had a lot of meaningful conversation with different people. So finally he got one name, that was Kasbai rice. Kasbai is traditional long grain rice variety which has distinct aroma, through much milder than basmati. It's a long duration crop, and most of the older people remembered growing it years ago, but they all shook their heads when he finally came to know about the kasbai rice. So what he came to know, that it is a traditional long grain rice. Okay, that's what the variety basically of the rice, and which had a distinct aroma. And apart from that, with what else he is saying, that it was a bit much milder than the basmati rice. And as it is a long duration rice, basically what does it mean? Like it takes longer time as compared to any other rice to grow. Okay, and most of the elder people remembered growing it years ago. And like to whomever he talked about the kasbai rice, what they mentioned, they used to grow it, but before so many years ago, not now or not recently they have grown it. And all of them shook their heads when he asked about where he can get the seeds for the rice. And everyone mentioned about, like it's disappeared now. Now you won't find it somewhere in the near about village or somewhere. The tales of Kasbai made us more determined to get it. We decided that if we did manage to get some seeds, this would be a great rice to grow. I thought the government may know something about it. So now what he's saying, like the much we came to know about the stories or the tales of the Kasbai rice, and so we were getting more interested into that, and I was getting more determined towards it, that yes, I will grow the same rice, that is kasbai rice. And what he decided, like to manage some of the seeds. If he get to manage, or like to get to grow, then they will definitely going to grow the very great rice. That's what he was thinking. And what he's saying, I the agricultural officer was enlightening. Now what he is saying, like we visited to the agricultural officer, and that visit basically was enlightening for us. He had not even heard of this rice variety. He said the villagers were taking me for a ride, and there was no rice by this name. Now, what he said, when I talked to the agricultural officer, what he mentioned, he doesn't have any idea about the rice, and he never heard of the name kasbai rice. And then what he mentioned, the villagers were taking him to the ride. So what he is mentioning now, he rattled off the names of a number of latest hybrids, and even offered to give me some of them free of cost for a trial. Cursing myself for wasting time with him, I moved on to the next destination. So basically, he even rattled off means what? Like, when you talk rapidly, or like, with a fast speed, if you are like taking names, that way he's talking. So what he's mentioning, like, he took some of the name very quickly, and, some of the latest hybrids basically. So what he's mentioning, and he even offered me some of the hybrid rice, but uh, even he was giving it for free of cost. He was not charging for that, for the trial at least. And then what the writer is mentioning here, that I cursed myself that I wasted my time over here. This time I was the it was the Adivasi Mahamandal at Kasa, which buys rice from the Adivasi villagers on behalf of the government. Now, this time where they are going to visit, they visited Adivasi Mahamandal, which was at Kasa. Okay, and now what he is mentioning, when I went there, so what they mentioned, or what he came to know over there in the or like at the Adivasi Mahamandal, they used to buy the rice from the villagers on behalf of the government. Kasbai did not figure in their files. A good indication why people did not grow it anymore. The market itself did not recognize the rice. So if you grew it, you would not be able to sell it. So now what he is mentioning over here, that basically what he came to know, that there was no mention of this rice in the government file also, or in any of the files there was no mention of the kasbai rice. So basically what he came to know, that it was a good indication and a clear indication that why people didn't grow this rice, basically the kasbai rice, because the files in those files there was no mention of the kasbai rice. So even if the people grow the kasbai rice, as the markets doesn't have the mention of the names in their files, so obviously even if they grow, they won't be able to sell it because it's not mentioned in any of the files in the market. So that's what the problem. Even if they grow, they won't be able to sell it. However, the officer in charge here had more knowledge of rice and did remember kasbai being sold to him a few years ago. Then later what happened, as they came to talk to the officer in charge, so he had more knowledge about the rices, and that's what was proved to be the good decision to meet him. And he did know about many of the rice, and he was the only one who informed the writer and basically to them, that he remembered that yes, before few years ago, he have been like sold by that rice, or he purchased that rice from the villager or someone. Sitting outside his house on a chapai, an ex-serpent of the village. He had acres of land, a huge house, and a large family. After exchanging the usual pleasantries, we came to the topic of Kasbai. Now, basically, they are in Dhanivari village. Okay, they came here to meet, Devu Handa. So Baban and the writer, both of them came to Dhanivari to meet Devu Handa. And who is Devu Handa? He is basically an old man. About whom it's mentioned about, like graying old man, and he was wearing a cap basically, and he was sitting outside his house on a chapai basically, and he was an ex serpent of the village. Okay, and he had acres of land and a huge house and a large family. After exchanging the usual pleasantries, we came to the topic of Kasbeh. First they had a normal casual conversation, and just exchanged the common thoughts basically. And then after that, they came to the main topic, that was Kasbai rice. The mere mention of the Kasbai and Devuhanda drifted tremble in his voice. He told us how the entire village at one time grew only kasbai. He said there was a time when people passing our village during lunchtime would be forced to stop and ask for a meal. Now, as they mentioned about the kasbai rice, Devuhanda got a bit emotional, or the pain, or the suffering that he had, or the feelings, the emotions that he had regarding that rice. They could clearly feel that, or they could clearly see that in his eyes, because the time when they mentioned about the kasbai rice, he turned to be a bit emotional. And when they used to grow that, and at the same time they used to even cook that same rice. So what he is mentioning, the people whoever used to pass through village, the village, that Dhanivari village, when they used to pass through that village, they used to be like, they forced themselves to stop over there. Why? Because of the aroma of the rice. Because every single villager used to cook the same rice at the same time, and the aroma that it had, it was something very different, and it was so attractive and alluring for everyone that they couldn't stop themselves to stop over there in the village and to ask for the meal. That's how the condition, or that's how, the aroma of the rice was, so that people used to force themselves and stop there in the village and used to ask for the lunch from the villager. And then what else he is mentioning over here? Such was the alluring aroma of the kasbai. The entire area would have this heady aroma hanging in the air as all the houses cooked the same rice. Today, he had no one grew kasbai and everyone had shifted to growing the new hybrid varieties. He claimed he had to force himself to eat this rice that was so insipid. Now, what he is mentioning over here, once there was a time everyone used to grow the same rice and used to cook the same rice, but now everyone stopped growing that and cooking that. Now everyone shifted to the hybrid rice, so that it takes lesser time and much quantity as compared to the kasbai one. So what he is mentioning, and he had to force himself to stop growing that and to shift to the other hybrid rice, and he had to force himself to eat those rice, or those insipid rice. Insipid means don't like to eat, basically. And that's what or that's how he felt. He didn't feel like eating that those rice, which is he didn't find it good or like eatable. That's how he felt. With the advent of irrigation, farmers were tempted to grow a second crop, and kasbai, being a long duration rice, was replaced by the shorter duration hybrid so that the harvest could be done earlier. This ensured that the farmers could take up a seasonal crop. Now, what he is mentioning, as the advent of irrigation, the farmers, they starts growing the second crop, because as the kasbai was a long duration rice, so people stopped growing that, because as the time they are waiting to harvest the kasbai rice, before that they could grow the another crop also if they are not growing the kasbai. So that's how they, that's how it got replaced with the shorter duration hybrids, and so that they can do the other crop, or they can grow other crops also, just within the same time. I asked why he had shifted if he was so unhappy with the hybrids. No one forced him to, did they? So then he was he asked him that why did you shifted to the hybrid rice if you didn't like it? Then what happened, or what forced you to do that, or what forced you to shift towards it? So what he is mentioning, he smiled and replied that their fields did not have fences, and once the harvest was over, the cattle were released into the fields. If my fields alone has kasbai, it will be a treat for the cattle, he explained. Now, what he is mentioning, as once the irrigation is done and harvesting is done, everything is done. So, means it will take longer time, and then it means when the people will leave their cattle onto their farms, so what will happen, they will as my farm or my field doesn't have any fences around that. What fences means, basically the boundaries which we make around the farms. So those fence I does in my field there is no fence. Okay, so obviously the animals can easily enter into inside the farm, and it will be like a treat to them if my field have the kasbai rice into them. Sometimes we have to fall in line with the community, he lamented. What lamented means, basically to express grief, basically. Hybrids need more water, fertilizers, and pesticides. He said that yields were good initially, but of late had reduced a lot. Besides, he said that each year they had to increase the quantity of urea and pesticides are used. Now what he is mentioning over here basically, that sometimes we have to do something as per the community, or we have to follow the community even when we don't want to do that. And then he lamented. And what he is mentioning, the hybrids are the one which needs more water, more fertilizers and pesticides. And what he's saying, in the beginning it was giving good yields, or the production was good, but later, as it started getting reduced. And besides all those, each year they had to increase the quantity of urea and pesticides whatever they were using. It was as if the newer hybrids had insatiable appetite for chemicals. He told us that even when there were flash floods in the 60s, Kasbai had stood its ground. He fondly remembered. But look what we have done, he rued. Now what is mentioning, the kasbai rice is something like, which was a very strong one. What he's mentioning, even if there is a flood, the kasbai rice will stay strong, and it will still stand from the ground, and it won't come out. And what he's mentioning over here, that once there was a flood in the village, and we had to move back to the another village. But after the water went down, and the flood was over. So when we came back to the village, what we saw, that the kasbai was standing over there, and it was still there strongly, firmly. And that was the strength of kasbai rice, that it didn't get ruined with the flood or anything. And what he's saying, but look at us, what we are doing now. As he went on reminiscing about the rice, we gently guided him back to the reason for our visit, the Kasbai seeds. He was sure that there was not a single villager in the area who would have the seeds of Kasbai. Then, as he got a bit emotional, then they had to take him back to the topic, that why they came over here. That was basically the Kasbai rice. So, they took him back to the topic and asked him that if they can get it. So what he mentioned, that it's not possible to get it somewhere in this area or in the village. According to him, the only people who still grew it were the Adivasis in a hamlet at the foothills of the mountains in the next village, Asarwari. We bid farewell to Devuhanda, who lovingly blessed us and said, Mahalakshmi, the local goddess, will give you the of the village, that is Asawari. That is basically the Adivasis village, or they live in the foothills, and that was the village of Adivasis, Asawari. So that's what he mentioned. You will get it over there. And then they took the farewell from there, and the Devuhanda basically, he blessed them, and what he said, that he to the name of a goddess, that is basically Mahalakshmi. And what he mentioned, that Mahalakshmi, the local goddess, will give you the seeds of Kasbai. And in Asarwari village, we asked the Sarpanch to help us. We were not very fluent with the local dialect. He sent his assistant Jeevan with us into the hills. After a half hour, walked through thick vegetation, crossing numerous streams and ditches, and scrambling over rocks and gravel, we reached the sleepy hamlet of Boripada. Now, basically, they reached in the Asarwari village, and they went to Sarpanch and asked him basically, to send someone with him, so that they can help him, or they can help them basically, because they cannot understand the language of that Adivasi people. They were not fluent with the local dialect. So basically, what Sarpanch did, he sent his assistant with them, whose name was Jeevan, and Jeevan went with them through the hills. There was a half an hour walk. They went through the thick vegetation. Then they crossed numerous streams. There were ditches and scrambling over rocks and gravel, and finally they reached the sleepy hamlet of the Boripada. There were just two ramshackles. Ramshackles means something which is disrepair, not in a very good condition, houses in front of us, and we wandered that one only or not? Then a wrinkled old woman sitting before one of the houses looked at us with curiosity. As we approached her, we signaled to Jeevan to ask the crucial question. She muttered in reply, and we looked at Jeevan for a quick interpretation. He broke into a smile and informed us that she did have the rice and wanted to know who we were and why we wanted it. So basically, when they came, they saw the woman, a wrinkled woman, basically a very old woman, and when she came out, or when they saw her, so like basically she looked with a curiosity at them, and Jeevan, he approached her, and she signaled, and that yes, basically she does have the rice. So Jeevan, first asked her, and then after muttering something with her, finally he informed to the writer, and what he mentioned, he signaled with a smile and informed him that yes, she did have the rice, and she also wanted to know that who we are and why did we come over here. That's what he mentioned, basically Jeevan. It was a difficult task to keep a straight face, and I had to control a strong desire to hug her. After searching for months, we had found the elusive Kasbai. Now, finally, what he is mentioning, basically, as he had the very strong emotions within himself. So what he is saying, it was very difficult for me to control my emotions, or to keep the straight face in front of her. I had a strong desire, basically, that time to hug that lady, but I controlled myself, and because we explained to her that we were from Pet nearby and we needed the seeds to grow it. We asked for 10 kilograms of rice. She muttered and scolded. Jeevan interpreted that had never heard of Pet Village and also did not have a weighing scale. She was willing to give the seeds only in baskets. Now what happened, basically, they when she wanted to know that where are we from and everything, so Jeevan informed her that we are from the Pet Village, but what she replied that she never heard of the place Pet Village, and as she was willing to give the rice, but she doesn't have any weighing scale. So what happened then? Weighing machine she doesn't have. So what happened? What Jeevan informed the writer about that lady, that she is willing to give it, but she does not have any of the weighing machine or anything. So now what to do? Then what happened? So she wanted to give it by the baskets. Okay, so we asked for a single basket of rice, and Jeevan told us to pay her something. I handed over a 100 rupee note, and for the first time in the last 10 minutes, her face broke into a smile. She nodded her head in approval. So, what he said, that she is willing to give. Or we would love to get one basket of rice, and instead of that, what Jeevan signaled to me, that to give some rupees in return of that rice, basically. So he handed over 100 rupees note, and when he handed over that note to that lady, she broke into the a very genuine smile, and there was a very beautiful smile on her face, and within those last 10 minutes, that was the best thing happened against the folding sunset, leaving behind a smiling old lady. I couldn't help but wonder that here, nestling in the foothills of an unknown mountain, away from the hustle and bustle of the road or the city. Now, what he's talking over here, basically, when they were going back, that was all the against of the fading sunset. There was when they left the lady behind. So what he is mentioning over here, I couldn't help myself but wander over there, and they were nestling in the foothills, an unknown mountain, away from the hustle and bustle of the road of the cities, where the real people of India. And what he's mentioning, this is a place where the real people of India lives, apart, or far away from the hustle and bustle of the cities. There were the people who still held on to the rich biodiversity of our land, and no one even cared about them. They had never heard of hybrids, fertilizers, or pesticides. Now, what he's mentioning here are the people who give the rich example of biodiversity and the land. And what he's mentioning here are the people who doesn't even know the hybrids and fertilizers. They do all the natural process for their farming. They just grew their rice and ate what they got. The old lady we met had probably never left Boripada. Her world was unspoiled by progress, and for once I was grateful for that. Now, what he's mentioning over here, like, that lady, she must have never left the village or never came out of the village, and they just grew the, organic farming they just did, and they just ate what they grew. And what he is mentioning over here about the progress is obviously good, but somehow or somewhere the things are also getting spoiled by the progress, like, things are getting affected into the negative way also. So what he's mentioning over here, that the life of that lady was unspoiled because of progress, and for once I was grateful for that, and for that I really felt, grateful regarding that. So I hope you must have understood. Thank you so much.